or syntax, and I'll take a motion at this time for the approval of the meetings.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Brian. Support?
Support.
Thank you, Jim. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. All right, great. Thank you very much. Next is public comments. Anybody here tonight wanting to say anything, bring anything to our attention, make a comment, come on up to the podium over there. We'll make sure that microphone is also on. Give us your name and address and any comments that you would like to make tonight. These are pictures from the flooding. No? Okay, I'm going to close that portion. Turning it over to our agenda, which starts with the PUD's rezone. The public hearing was previously held on the Jupiter condominiums on Conkle. And Brian, do you have that application?
I do. Project name is Jupiter Condominiums. Rezone applicant is Redstone Properties. Project address 2306 Conkle Drive. It's the southwest corner of West River Drive and Jupiter Avenue. Permanent parcel number 41-10-21-426-005. Size of site 13.97 acres. Current zoning rural RP Rural Preserve. And project description and action requested to provide a recommendation to the Township Board to rezone the subject property from rural reserve to R3 to planned unit development to allow a residential development consisting of 38 condominium units.
Thank you. Was this tabled?
The applicant has a presentation for tonight and having a little technical difficulty, so I'm gonna have to run over in there and see if I can get the thumb drive to work while you're speaking here real quick, just so you know.
Okay. Can I call the applicant up for a discussion or
Yes,
comments?
yes, I
Okay,
just wanna let you
great.
know.
Anyone here for that purpose?
Did I miss public comment?
You did. See, we start on time.
It's coming from Gaines.
Yep. And you are, yeah, thank you.
While Peter's getting that ready, my name's Rob Lamer. I'm with Excel Engineering. I'm the engineer on this project. I'm hoping he gets these slides up here because that's going to be, there we go. I see something. It's going to be helpful for me. So,
Point of, was this tabled at the last meeting?
Postponed, I believe.
Postponed, okay. I'm sorry, just point of order.
nope,
Go right
that's
ahead.
all right. I'm stalling anyway.
I was helping.
So we listened a lot about what the concerns were at the last meeting from the public hearing standpoint, and I think that it was quite clear the floodplain is the main issue. And so I have here a PDF of different things that will help explain how floodplains work and where we are and what we're doing.
Well, if you want to stall for a couple minutes, I can let this gentleman have a public comment.
That is fine with me.
Mind? Okay. Okay. Come on up, identify yourself over here with the microphone. Address?
What's that?
Name and address.
Max Grover, 7040 Old Lantern, in Caledonia. I do own some property in Plainfield Township, but not here to talk about that either. It's commercial property. Talk about 6130 West River Drive on behalf of Bill Skalski. It's actually right, just so happens to be next to the Redstone parcel on the south, would that be the southeast corner of Jupiter and West River Drive. He owns the acreage right on
Max,
that.
I put that up there, you can point it out to him.
Thank you. Yep, it's right next to the county piece. And he bought the land some time ago with at least perception, and I don't know what the full conversations were in the past, that this could be developed commercially someday. And he's been sitting on it. He'd like to do something with it and sell it. We did in the past and bring a national daycare that wanted to come to Plainfield Township, and just with response and everything that we got from municipality and planning, nothing against Peter. I mean, he's great to work with, but they just weren't excited to take the chance and pursue it. So I think it's probably a good time for obviously, with this happening, to continue to talk about that and maybe the whole area. And then I know the owner on the northeast corner as well. I don't know if he's brought anything forward, but there's something coming forward on his parcel as well. So there's a lot of demand in this area to develop. I know floodplain's a challenge, but even in Bill's case, he's working with partners, similar to, I'm sure you guys as well, that could raise it up out of the floodplain legally, safely, and bring good projects. It was unfortunate to see that daycare leave. They were national daycare similar to Goddard. It would have been the first of its kind in West Michigan, this competing brand, and they ended up passing on it. They're going to be developing in other municipalities now, and it's a huge demand for everyone right now. So just wanted to bring that comment and just say, hey, like, maybe this is a good time to open the whole area up, and as opposed to just not to stall their project out. I wouldn't want to see that happen necessarily, and I'm sure a lot of people here are maybe opposed to it too, based on the news article I saw. Yeah, just thought it would be a good time to like make some decisions, even for Bill's sake, who, property owner, taxpayer, what can I do with this ever type thing, and he's really struggling with that. So any help that you guys could give him in any direction would be greatly appreciated. That's all I got. Thank you.
Evans?
All right, here we are. So this is the project as proposed. While this is up, I'm going to just show one little thing that maybe I won't show. Sorry. So this area here, it's quite obvious, is cut. That area, a big portion of this property is going to be, if approved, dropped in elevation. That dirt that comes from here is proposed to be moved to this area, which is where the homes will be. And I think that it's important to understand that, so that when you start looking at floodplains and what they do, you're voting and you're understanding what is being said by others may not be 100% true. So let's jump over to that slide now there, Peter. So this is the site today, the way it looks. The boathouse is down over here. If you look on the plan, our proposed buildings will be behind that, and probably, I would think, I don't remember the exact floor elevation of this, but probably 8 or so feet higher in elevation than that floor. Next slide, please. This is the driveway out front where the boathouse currently is served. It's a Kent County Road Commission driveway, and it was approved by Kent County Road Commission. Kent County Road Commission owns the boathouse. I am 100% sure that they reviewed that and built it to their plans. The right-of-way line is right around here, and that grade of the floodplain, the grade of the drive, not the grass, but the grade of the drive, is about 1 foot to 1 to 14 inches below the floodplain. So West River Drive at the gutter pan here is probably 18 inches or so below the base flood elevation. The base flood elevation is the 1% chance storm, or the 100-year. If you hear those terms, they're all synonymous. 1% chance, 100-year base flood elevation. So the center of West River Drive probably is maybe a foot below the floodplain in this spot. Next slide, please. I have pulled together some stuff from the flood insurance study, and I just threw the cover page up there. That's a FEMA document. It's online, you can find it. If you can zoom in, can you zoom in on those? And the next page, if you look at what this says here, it says that that area of a floodplain can be permitted to be filled. This is not something unusual that I'm just pulling out of my head. It's permitted. I've had it permitted before. that it is allowed, that's just the way it is. Now the next page, please. This is this I think is the best slide to understand floodplains, and I really like to teach. So even if you're against this, if you're thinking that this is not what you want, I want you to understand this so that you can kind of understand what goes on. So this is a profile of the river, West River Drive over here. Not really scale, I'm just trying to show what things are. The 1% chance high water level gets right up about at West River Drive, and the normal water level is down here. If I were to take that ground, which I'm proposing to do, and cut the lower part, and then put that cut in the upper ground, what happens is that the 10% chance storm, the 10-year event, the one that happens more frequently than the base flood elevation, will drop in elevation. So in other words, this project, I'm not going to say how much it will drop because I haven't calculated that, but what happens is when it floods, the water has room to store down here where it didn't before. And because of that, the water level drops because the amount of water is a fixed volume. So the theory goes, if I take the same volume of cut and fill over here, the 1% chance will not increase or decrease because the volume spatially for the flooding water is the same. The same volume of water is there, or the space for volume of flooding can be stored in it. But the smaller, more frequent storms are going to be able to drop in elevation because that is the lower part of the floodplain, okay? I want that to be clear because I do not want to raise the floodplain. I would never do that, and the EGLE would never permit me to do that. I don't think the township would permit me to do that either. There's been a lot of places around town here where XL and other companies have worked through this process to be able to drop the more frequent floodplain elevations or flood events elevations. Okay, let's go to the next page, please. And then we'll just skip through these two real quick. So in Grand River, the next question that I'm going to run to is, how often does the water get up to that base flood elevation? In Grand River and Ada, and go down one more page, there is a gauge station. It is the nearest gauge station to, it's the most up, it's the one that's just upstream of Plainfield Township. We're over here, there isn't a gauge station on the Grand River except in Ada. So I'm just pointing that out. That's why I'm moving to Ada and not something in Plainfield Township. There is a gauge station on the Rogue River, but that's not the same river. So next page, please. So here is in that FIS document, the flood insurance study document from FEMA, what they call historic flooding elevations. And this is a new document. So if you haven't looked at this, this came out February 23 of this year. So it's only a month and a half old, maybe I guess 2 months now. Wow, look at that. Well, 10 years ago, this week, the peak historic record flood level was on the Grand River in Ada at that gauge station. That was on April 21, 2013. The elevation was at 626.32 on the gauge. If you look at and I didn't print this out, but the 1% chance storm, the floodplain elevation, the base flood elevation, the 1% chance, the 100 year, it at that gauge station is right around 630.7 feet. Compared to what the gauge was, which was 626.32. So it was 4 feet below the base flood elevation. That's probably a little surprising because everybody around here said, oh, that's the biggest storm we've ever seen. Oh, wow, this is huge. And it still wasn't the base flood elevation. Let's go one more page. These are all storms at that gauge station. So if you're curious, if you've got some good history, there's even 2019, 2005, and so on. You can read that and look at that document online. Next page, please. So this is in Ada, at that gauge station, where it falls on the profile of the river. So the river is flowing down the street this direction, and the base flood elevation is this line right here. The 1% chance is the dash, double dash, small dash line. That's where that is. That's at 630.7. Where's the historic high? That's here. It's between the 10% storm and the 4% storm, which is a 25-year, 10-year if you're used to the old terms. So if you look at where that storm was, it's not even close to the base flood elevation, the 100-year event. It wasn't even a 25-year storm, a 4% storm. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at access to the site, what we're doing, how much fill we're doing in the floodplain. We are truly digging out something down low that is not, and then filling it, that's not going to affect things very often because the storm doesn't get that high very often. All right? Next page, please. So now let's relate that back to where we are. This is in Plainfield Township at Jupiter Bridge. The base flood elevation here is 621.2 feet. So it's downstream, makes sense. That was 626. It's dropped 5 feet in elevation as you work from Ada down to here. If you look at that same line, you probably would say that falls somewhere between this 10-year and the 25-year. So you're looking at somewhere around 617, 618 or something is what the floodplain is there. So I can safely say, in looking at this, that West River Drive historically has never flooded at that driveway because it's below the 4% storm in elevation over there. So if you keep that into perspective, I think you might hear some stuff about access from fire, that sort of thing. I don't think you're going to have too much of a concern to access this site. And if you did, you'd certainly have warning, just like back in the day when we had the storm in 2013. And there's probably even another place where you could get access temporarily from, if we built it off from Jupiter, if we had to, if the township requested us to. So that's kind of my, honestly, my presentation, all about floodplain. I think this is a wonderful project. It's something that literally they're taking big risks on. There's a lot of cost to moving that dirt from the low end to the upper end for a site like this. There's a lot of dirt that has to move. There's a lot of water main that will have to be constructed, and they're committed to doing at the request of the township along West River Drive. The bike path construction, all of those things have costs. When you only have 38 units that you're working with, that's a big deal. And you start dividing those costs out by 38, you start realizing where that number has to fall. So I am happy to answer questions. I understand this is a tough project. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not even going to be, I guess what I would say, an easy project for me to design. It's certainly going to take a lot of time. When I work through the EGLE for a project like this, it's probably going to be close to a year before I finally get approval. I did get approval to do similar cut and fill back in 2004, 2005 when Dykema's owned it. And I'm a little disappointed, honestly, because it took so much work to get that permit. If they would have done that dirt fill at the time, then it would have probably been much more easy to see this site get done at this point. But that didn't happen. But I'm confident that we're proposing things that are very similar And I think that we can get EGLE approval. And we're asking for township approval first, because certainly the effort to go through the EGLE process is not worth the weight that it takes if the township's not going to look at the number of units. And there we go. Thank you. I appreciate it. Any questions?
Peter, is there anything you want to say before we take over up here?
Yes. In the staff report, we tackled a number of different issues that were brought up at the last meeting, not including, not limited to traffic, access to the boathouse, as well as dry land access to this property for emergency vehicles and services, and the actual permitting process. I do want to note, staff did not add a condition of approval on there that they get an Eagle permit. That is one possibility for you to think of. If you're inclined to approve this project, you could add that as a condition out there. So I did want to bring that to your attention. In brief summary, I have talked to the fire department about dry land access. For the most part, in most flood events, they could get their vehicles over there. Right in front of it, we figured it was about 14 inches and a 100-year flood in depth of water there. So right in front of the building, right across from Porter Hills, that would be about the maximum height according to that data. If it got to that height, that 4 inches, they might have to access by boat. That's what it really comes down to there. Access would probably have to come down through Porter Hills and not to the east or west, because it continues to dive down onto the east and to the west in terms of flood elevations. So, how does that affect the township? We have problems like that all over. I think in the staff report I alluded to that. We got it in Grand River, we got it in Coit, we have it elsewhere. But this would, in theory, be an isolated island in some ways. The second issue I wanted to touch base with you on, there was a lot of comment in regards to the rowing club. After reviewing that, reviewing the narrative from the school, and that I do think a lot of the issues are primarily at the burden of the school district here. I do think the applicant is meeting the significant, I think the applicant is doing what they need to do in terms of providing them a modified access easement to the property in terms of that relationship. The school will have to work out their parking and their events based on what they have available. Open space, you know, it's quite likely with the amount of grading and work that has to be done on this, the existing tree cover would almost be completely removed. They have some spots where they show that they can save it, but if you look at the design and layout, it would be rather difficult in staff's opinion to do so. So they would have to do some after-the-fact planning. That said, that can be handled through the site plan review process. So just to make it clear, if for some reason this project were to be approved and go to the board and then also be approved, it would still have to come back to you for site plan approval and review of these technical things that we're dipping our toes into right at the moment. Last, I just want to make a note. There are two motions essentially set up in here. They're split into the rezoning to the R3 from rural preserve to R3. That's for the applicant to get the density. The other one is from R3 to PUD. That R3 zoning is conditioned upon you giving a favorable recommendation for the PUD. I do think tonight you'll have to make motions on both of those because, and just for the audience, the Planning Commission is recommending in this instance. They can recommend to approve to the Township Board. They can recommend to approve with conditions, or they can recommend denial. But the applicant may choose to still go back to the Township Board for another public hearing and see what the board will say, because they are the final say on terms of approving or not approving this project. If you have any questions for me, please let me know. I don't want to go too deep into the other technical issues at this point, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Let's start, Jack. You have any questions, comments, observations?
I have one for the developer. What happens over time, let's say 25, 50 years, in terms of erosion of this river?
actually, you have the ability to have ground cover reestablish itself, and the flow is very little through this site because it's caught on the leeward side of the bridge. So the floodway is this line. That's the main flow of the river. All of the proposed work that's fill is on the upland side of it. And so the water is not going to be flowing this way. If anything, you're going to have cleaner water when it reaches the river because it's got to go through more ground and it's
Okay, there's an undercurrent going on in here, and let's just show some respect to the fellow that's answering the questions. I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. Sorry, go ahead.
so the water has the ability to clean through the fact that the slope is not that great. It'll turn to probably a wetlandy look over time.
That's all the questions I had.
Dennis?
I appreciate your presentation. It was very thorough. So by doing this, you, by law of Eagle, you have to be able to offset the cut and fill. So otherwise, this thing won't even work. So you're not going to be impacting
Correct.
area.
Correct. There is no way EGLE is going to approve this unless I do exactly what I said. The amount of fill has to be compensated exactly or greater with more or equal amount of cut, volume-wise. And the way to bring it above the floodplain, we have to, from our building floor elevations, we're going to try to be at least 1.5 feet, I think, above the floodplain. That's usually my goal, if not even higher. So when we fill above, we're gonna fill even more because we wanna make sure those homes, by code, I think you need to be 1 foot above the base flood elevation with your floor. Your lowest adjacent grade, which is the lowest ground that touches the structure, has to be at or equal to the floodplain. The floodplains do change when the FEMA puts new maps together. In fact, going through this study and looking at this area specifically, it looks like FEMA took the floodplain and has dropped it 0.8 feet compared to what it was before here. And that's because people do better analyses of the river than what were done back in the 70s and 80s. And that's what they're coming up with. Now, you can go through that and try, I don't want to make it too confusing, but that's the truth. So when I put the floors of these houses up here, I don't just go to the rule. I go beyond the rule because I want those homes to be safe. So that dirt that I need to build it extra high has to be pulled from somewhere. I'm not gonna haul it in from off-site except if there's not good material. Obviously, you gotta have good material. So I'm gonna actually dig more off the site than what I have to because the area above the floodplain, I'm going to fill and I need the dirt for it. And I'm gonna just dig it from on site because I wanna, and that's only gonna help me through my EGLE process.
Okay.
And just a side note, if you didn't catch that, we literally had office complexes, very similar layout, approved in 2005 with DQ at the time, with almost the exact same, certainly the same scheme of cut. And so I should be able to get approval for through them. It just takes time and it takes effort.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. You're replacing a lot of forested area with impervious surfaces. So what is the effect of a hard rain like we had on this thunderstorm last week? What is the effect of that in loading the area around the condos as far as retaining the water before it can get anywhere because of all of these hard surfaces?
You have the township and the drain commission, have rules about that. We cannot release a higher peak flow to the river than what it is under the existing conditions. So one of the things that I will be doing probably is this area here will be that water quality on the north side between the West River Drive and the condos as being the water quality and then the detention that's required for the fact that there is impervious area. As much as you say there's a lot of more impervious area, in some respects, the site is not very thick with impervious area because it's dense. It's tight. And if you have longer roads and that sort of thing, now all of a sudden you have more of that. So that's one of the advantages of going to a PUD where you have a tighter density like this. But yes, we certainly have to meet those rules.
So you're saying that that area in the northeast is, because it's lower in the center between West River Road and the base of where you're coming up to seat the condos, that retention area will slow down the water coming into.
Correct. So the way I envision it is we put catch basins here, we put that into here, and then we have an outlet pipe that will be restricted probably from here to there. So then that water will have to filter its way, and we can even create kind of a meandering thing that increases the length so that it has better quality, rain garden-ish kind of thing. And there's plenty of room for water quality and stormwater detention on this site.
You sort of touched on, yeah, floodplain maps change over time. Could a major change make, like 50 years from now, could this then be unusable?
I think that most engineers are probably over-conservative. And if you pull up the last page on my PDF there, I don't know if you can do that. This is really confusing. I don't want to kind of mess with it, but that's a good question. So if you look real close, it says 1% annual chance flood, but above it, it has in quotes, 1% chance annual chance storm. That's the line right above this one. That's that 0.8 feet, where with this 2023 study, they have dropped the floodplain 0.8 feet. They left the line on the plan, and if you dig back through the FIS, the flood insurance study, it'll explain what that is. What they say in there shortly is, in Ada, upstream, they haven't analyzed it with the lower 0.8. They recognize that it's going to happen, but no one has analyzed it yet. An engineer hasn't reanalyzed it with the lower. So the way of, and this is another thing that term-wise I think it's important to understand, this is subcritical flow, which means everything downstream holds back the water from going faster. So when you're looking at things, you're holding it back due to subcritical flow. So because we dropped, they dropped at 0.8 feet, all of a sudden there's 0.8 feet less head of water holding that water back from Ada. Their study had it as 0.8 higher. Well, when they restudy it, that'll automatically drop it. And at some point it will probably catch up and be back to where it was. But somebody has to analyze it. So where does it go? It probably will, I'm thinking, go down because that's where they're going now. But, it's the other thing that's really, when you start, floodplains is one of my favorite subjects, so I can probably talk about this way too long, and I don't want to confuse too many people and get too, but somebody arbitrarily said the 100-year event is where we have the dividing line between insurance or not needing insurance. That's the purpose of the 2% chance, the 100-year, is where does somebody have to buy insurance or where it doesn't have to be insured. That's why it's called a flood insurance map. FIS, flood insurance study. This is what the purpose is. There's a storm, it's labeled right here, the 0.2% annual chance storm. That floodplain's way over West River Drive. So there's floodplains that can happen at any elevation. But the reality is that we always focus on this 100-year because that's where people either buy insurance, required to buy insurance, or not. And it's kind of this arbitrary chosen thing. You can start even going into different 100-year events. They're not all equal. Some 100-year events are based on big, long, drawn-out storms. Others, like something in your neighborhood maybe that you're seeing, is a flash floody kind of thing where it's a short but less volume, but it's more intense, and it's 100-year too. Where do you go? They have to choose something. In the end, the maps have something on it because they have to choose something. But that's how it kind of all runs.
A couple other, hopefully quick questions on this one. Will these condos have basements?
No, slab on grade.
And Pete, if you could go back to the site map, just, so you're building up, how are you retaining that dirt in place?
We have, if you go down here on the plan, I think there's a profile of what we have. These are probably 1-on-5 slopes, which means we're dropping, that's the real life view of it.
Is it just dirt then?
Yes.
So there's not retaining walls or?
Nope.
Okay, so it's all just dirt, and how do you hold that in place then?
1-on-4 slope is 1 foot drop and 4 feet across.
Yeah,
So it's about like this,
so it's just natural that it,
natural.
okay. Okay. I think that's all I have.
1-on-4 can be mowed, 1-on-3 can be mowed, 1-on-2 slopes get to be unmowable if you're trying to think about where is my cutoff when I design things.
Guess we have three pieces we have to look at here. Is the development aligned with the master plan? And I'm hearing that it generally is. Township master plan. The unfortunate part is we're going to be starting a process here within the next month of updating the township master plan. So commenters' comments earlier, hopefully we'll have some better resolution on this West River Drive corridor over time and how we in the township board can deal with this development, because we're hearing there's going to be pressure, continued pressure for development, and we want to make sure it's going to be compatible as much as we can. It's generally permitted by the zoning ordinance, although we have to go through this process of rural preserve to development to PUD. And then the question that most concerns me, I've served 4 years on the Township Flood Mitigation Committee, and a lot of hard, good work has gone into that. We're waiting to finish that work up. We were waiting for the new flood insurance maps to be released, and apparently that's all in process. But there's tension between the work we've done on that committee in this development in terms of principles and practices, what is best for not only for the local condition, but for the township in the broader form. And that's what I'm struggling with in terms of this decision today. Question I have for Peter is if this body and the township board were inclined to approve this, is there a mechanism in place to require a notification of prospective buyers that the property that they're going to be residing in is not in a flood zone, but let's call it a flood zone affected area? Because it certainly will be affected by 100-year event, potentially up through West River Drive, and access will become an issue. But is there a mechanism or anything in place that we can utilize in terms of a condition to approval?
Side note, right here would be an excellent place above the floodplain. You could create a temporary kind of emergency access point right to that whole set point.
Peter, do you have an answer for that?
Yes. So first, just to let you know, what we've done with Riverbend to further to the east is every one of these that's built, we require an elevation certificate. Why do we require that? Because insurance companies continue to kind of barely look at the maps, and when you have a condominium like this, all they're looking at is if there's a floodplain on there, and that helps them with their insurance, as well, helps us verify those first floors are 1 foot out, and we're not allowing a house to be built that's got a huge liability. Same for the developer, of course. So there is that insurance, flood insurance process, and anything backed by a federal mortgage gets looked at. Now, does the homeowner always get that disclosed to them? Do they always read that? No. It's very small print I've seen in some of these documents in the past. I've had people that have bought houses right on the river and came back and told me, I didn't realize it flooded. It happens. With this, it'll also be part of the master deed document, I believe, because it has to be incorporated in that document, and then he's also going to deal with the drain commission and that. So most of the time, it should get caught. There is not any official mechanism that these people would be notified in every instance that I'm aware of. Rob, I don't think you are aware of anything either, are you?
Part of those condo documents, there's probably gonna be like a block grading plan that you do with every plat, and you would have that sort of thing. Side note, if the emergency access is a big deal, this bubble of the cul-de-sac could be temporarily not like paved, but you could create a route that's above the floodplain by just going from there across to Jupiter, across the sidewalk, and then you'd never have to have boats rescue people. There's ways to do that. Rare, but that can be done.
Well, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. That's all I have.
Yeah, I was gonna follow up from your question about the FEMA floodplain levels. It sounds like those were just updated recently. When was the last time they were updated, and how frequently do they
I think
do
it
that?
was probably, most of Kent County was done back in the 1980s, like 81, 82, somewhere 88. I'm not sure what Plainfield Township was. Ever since I started in 1992, I know we were using those maps. So this is the first time.
These aren't things that are changing every 2 to 5 years. They last for
Well,
quite a
so
while.
yeah, but somebody could do a PMI, which is a physical map, PMR, physical map revision. So if somebody does that analysis on Ada's part of the river and they accept it, you have to get the EGLE approval, and the EGLE administers to FEMA what the floodplain elevation is. That's kind of the way that works in Michigan. And so, like, for example, around Waterford condominiums, back in my early part of my career, I got permits to fill in the floodway even, such that those homes could be built on there. And what happened was Versluis Lake was dug out, and it created more floodplain, and that compensating cut could then be filled for a lot of those homes. And those homes have never flooded, and they've been around now for over 20 years. And these homes too, these are the easy ones. They're above, they were built right. It's the ones that are down low that, honestly, it's hard to say this, but you're not gonna change that river. This project will help, but it's not gonna fix flooding. It just can't. There you go. Sorry, too much.
One of the things I was gonna ask too was related to whether there are similar examples of this cut and fill in the neighborhood, in the area, and it sounds like Versluis was one, and.
So Versluis Lake and the new one where the park is, where the golf course was, that, I forget the name of that project, but that's in our office. John Mayo worked on that one. Grandview condominiums even, that was a small differential. It's over on West River Drive. I could go up and down the river. There's other places too in Ottawa County that I've worked with.
Thank you. I think for the rest of us up here, I think one of the questions still kicking around in my head is, if this project doesn't work, will any project work on this piece of property? with any other sort of solution to the floodplain issue? And if not, does that just become an unusable piece of property? And how do we feel about that? So that's a question without an answer likely, but definitely something still floating in my head. But that's all.
Parcel underwater last week or the week before? Don't do that, please.
It could have been because most of the parcel is below the floodplain. But that's where we're taking that dirt out and moving it to the high ground and making it above the floodplain.
That dirt out also removes major vegetation, trees and all that.
Which can grow
That
back,
runoff.
not when it grows back.
How long will it take to grow back to this point?
Probably you can plant stuff to have small growth and then it will, it'll grow up pretty quick, I would think. But it will probably look more like a wetlandy look instead of taller trees, you're right.
Would these owners of the homes have to get flood insurance?
No,
Because they're that far away from it?
because they're above the floodplain and they're meeting building code.
My experience on the planning board has been that for years we were trying to buy up the property along the river so that we wouldn't have people living in the floodplain. And this is not what I imagined when we were talking about doing something like that. This is bringing them into the floodplain again, close enough to the floodplain to cause problems. The master plan indicates this is mixed use area number 4. West River and Jupiter. And this is a high-risk area that we consider a high-risk area in the township. And although it's possible, as we've seen, to build in it, it's still going to stay a high-risk area because of the river itself, which is a concern for me. We spent time and effort buying up property along the river to get to the point where we can create what you were on, the plans that you were on. And that was something that I thought was the vision here for the township. So those are my comments. Check.
I have one more question. What will be the effect of, in Grand Rapids, when they're getting rid of the dams and making it a recreational river? What will be the effect on the Grand River? Do you know?
I haven't modeled that. I would imagine that the floodplain will go down a little bit in certain areas. They certainly cannot increase the floodplain. What will happen is probably the flow will have a less of a hydraulic jump because of the dams that are there. That's what they're really doing, is just taking out of the dams. And so then the profile will be more of a straight line instead of a hydraulic jump downward, like a waterfall kind of.
I can,
Keep in mind that most of the removal of the dams has been put on hold. That plan has been scaled, unfortunately, way back, at least unfortunately in my mind. But that's a development within the last few months, that they've been denied permission to do most of what they wanted to do in Grand Rapids.
And I should add, I don't think it'll affect anything here. I would not project the floodplain to drop here because of them removing some stuff. What I'm saying is it will soften the floodplain right within the first few hundred feet of those dams that are there.
All right, appreciate that.
just to add to that, there's 19 feet of fall roughly. I can't remember the exact spot, but there's a fair amount of fall between here and Grand Rapids. So because of that fall, the ability to cause upstream flooding and the removal of those dams limits quite a bit. I've heard just upstream less than 6 inches of change. Now, that doesn't, it was just a long time ago, so I can't quantify all that. But when these maps have been delayed for almost 15, 20 years, and one of the more recent delays was as they remapped Woodworth all the way straight down to the township line and beyond that, as part of, I believe, that, as well as trying to take a good look at the flood walls and earthen dams and whatever the city of Grand Rapids has. So the general consensus that I go is the impact that I have gotten from folks at Elgro and at the city and elsewhere is that the upstream impact is fairly minimal.
Appreciate that, thanks.
Robin?
Peter, evidently, since we considered this project a couple months ago, a petition has been submitted.
That is correct.
What is the effect of that petition, and how should we consider that?
It's just for you to consider the number of the folks around it do not feel it's in character with the surrounding area and might detrimentally impact that area. You certainly can take that into account. There are a lot of factors involved.
Peter, just quick, so the two motions, obviously if we deny the first, the second one is a moot point at that.
Well, normally, yes, normally we would have, because one's, the
Yeah.
PUD is contingent on it, but because they may well go to the township board, I think you need to act on both of them.
Okay, fair enough.
Anyone else? All right, I'll take a motion at this time.
Well, I would move that the planning commission recommend the township board approve the ordinance to amend to rezone 2306 Conkle Drive Northeast as described in the concept plan dated January 23rd, 2023, from RP Rural Preserve to R3 Residential based upon the findings of fact as outlined in the staff report and meeting reports of the February 28th, 2023 and April 25th, 2023 Planning Commission meetings, and subject to the following condition of approval, that the applicant shall proceed with a PUD planned unit development rezone as described in the concept plan dated January 23rd, 2023.
Support?
Support.
Do a roll call vote. Jack?
No.
Dennis?
Yes.
Robin?
No.
Brian?
Yes.
Jim?
No.
Nancy?
Yes.
I don't know. 4-3, okay, all right. I'll take a motion on the second issue. Well, for clarity, should we have a motion on denying the request?
That's correct.
And I'll take a motion on that at this time.
I move that the planning commission recommend to the township board deny the ordinance to amend to rezone 2306 Conkle Drive Northeast as described in the concept plan dated January 23, 2023, R Rural Preserve to R3 Residential based upon the findings of fact. The rezoning request is not consistent with and does not meet the spirit of the township zoning ordinance, the Plainfield Township Comprehensive Plan, and the Township Floodplain Mitigation Plan. The proposed development would have a negative impact upon adjacent properties. The proposed development is not in the interest of the public health, safety, and welfare of the township. The proposed development would introduce a residential style of development that is different in nature than that envisioned as that part of the township's long-term plans for the character of this area. And 5, the proposed development is not supported for these reasons set forth by members of the Planning Commission and members of the public as reflected in the entire record of this matter, including the meetings.
I'll take support.
Support.
Thank you, Robin. Further discussion? All those in favor, once again, I'll do a head vote count. Jack?
Yes?
Dennis? No. Robin?
Yes.
Brian? No. Jim?
Yes.
Nancy?
No.
I vote yes. All right, and that carries. Next is a motion to rezone from residential to PUD.
Well, I
think
Yeah,
this is
think-
where it gets a little,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I think
just-
we can pass at this point, yeah.
I mean, yeah, because we could go for a favorable, but I think we're going to end up in the same place.
I agree. Okay. Anyone disagree? No, thank you. All right.
I would just I would agree with Nancy, and I said this before, if not this, then what? It's.
Well, we've
you know,
taken the
but-
vote.
Yeah,
and-
I know.
And we're done with this, and I would just point out that this is not the end of the story. We are a recommending body. It now goes to the commissioners for them to make a decision on the same request. So that will come up sometime in the future. Okay. Okay, next is on our agenda is site condo, public hearing for Autumn Trails, Phase 2. And is there an applicant here to tell us about the project? Oh, no, you better read it first. No one will ever know what you're talking about.
My name? Oh, no, that does
Brian.
make, yes, there we go. Project name Autumn Trails Site Condominium Phase 3. Applicant is Signature Land Development, Mike McGraw. Project address 8183 Fall Harvest Court. Permanent parcel number 41-10-02-200-078. Size of site 50.87 acres. Zoning RE Rural Estate. Project description and action requested. The applicant is requesting site condominium approval for 25 single-family home sites, parcels, and preliminary private road approval, Fall Harvest Court. And this is the final phase of the Autumn Trails development.
Okay, thank you. And you are Mike McGraw?
Yes, I am.
Tell us about your project.
I think most of you are probably familiar with it. I didn't plan a big presentation tonight. It is the final phase of a previously approved project that was the subject of a settlement agreement. It's consistent with the plan that was approved, and we're looking forward to getting wrapped up. This housing will be consistent with what was built in the second phase. The first phase, as you probably all know, were a combination of detached and attached condominiums. Phase 2, which was sites 1 through 32 here, or site condominium units. This will be similar to those.
This is a public hearing. Anybody wanting to make a comment, come on up on this project. Come on up. Give us your name and address and your comments. All right, I'll close that portion of the meeting, opening it up to, Peter, anything you want to tell us before we get started?
Love to tell you all kinds of things about this project. I think we started this one, I don't know, 15 years ago or so. It did go to litigation ultimately. Yeah, it's been a while. Went to litigation, we did a settlement agreement. This would be the third and final phase of that. There's been some minor changes to the layout, in particular up towards 10 Mile a little bit and relocating some streets a bit, but the number of units has stayed consistent. Development plan has stayed consistent. The developer does have a public sidewalk through the main part of the development. The sidewalk on Fall Harvest will technically be a private sidewalk. I do have one condition that we added on to this. Way back in the day, we did try to connect sanitary sewer to the west across the neighbor's property. That neighbor was not willing to work with the developer or the township in that regard, but there is a sanitary sewer trunk line over there, as well as we might want to loop water, so we are looking for easements to the west. I don't imagine that's an issue for the developer, but I do want to bring that up. And the only other thing is streetlights are required, and that's all I have on this one. So let me know if you have any questions.
If you're going to, you need to use a microphone.
So I can't hear. That came up during the township engineer review, and they reached out to our engineer and let us know we have no opposition to granting that easement for potential future benefit, as Peter described. So no problem with that, and I've already corresponded on that topic.
Okay, thank you. Let's start up here. Nancy, do you have any questions, comments?
Nope, not on this one.
Nothing here.
Brian?
Peter, I guess just as, I mean, it's phase 3 of something, it's sort of a foregone.
So even more so as a settlement agreement.
Well, that's what I'm saying, with litigation and everything, do we have a lot of,
Well, yeah, you certainly within the details of the site plan, and if you see something, you know, incorrect or an error in a lot design or something, you can mention it, or deal with it. But yes, it is pretty much cemented in by legal agreement.
and is, I mean, phase 1 and 2 have gone smoothly, no issues, no
Not that I'm aware of.
township?
The single-family homes are selling like hotcakes, and I think he's almost built out on the condos.
Condos are almost done, yeah, okay. So it's been a smooth
Yeah,
thing, okay,
haven't really had much complaint.
okay.
Robin?
I have no questions.
Dennis? No questions. Jack?
I'm so used to saying no on this project. It's almost a knee-jerk reaction. I was involved in the arbitration a full day, and it came down to the wire. And we finally got it done, and so I'm very happy to be able to say yes today.
For whatever it's worth, I know I talked to you about it. Maybe I should just be formal, but we are happy with how it turned out. I mean, I think from the beginning, we said that we knew that this sort of project would work. We just knew that it would end up being very high-end, which is not what we were trying to do. We were trying to do a more mixed-use project that had more variety and price point. We got pushed this direction, and it's where we went, and it has been successful. I mean, the condos sold quickly, and the single-family homes, as Peter described in the first phase of the site condominium, were very well received, and we don't expect anything different. In fact, this will probably be higher end yet because the lot sizes have gotten a little bigger, particularly the ones in the southwest corner. But all of them, we don't anticipate any issue with finishing this up. So we're happy with how it turned out, and hopefully the people who drive through there and kind of fought us on this are pleased with the effort we put into it. Because despite not it being exactly what we had in our mind to begin with, we still try to do our best job there and invest in the landscaping and make it a community that we can be proud of 10 years from now. That's really what we try to do in all the communities we build, is to take a long-term approach, and we didn't treat this one any differently. Despite the history it had, we still wanted to do a great job for a variety of reasons, and we're thankful to have been able to do that.
Having said that, I'd take a motion. First of all, we do have some conditions. Brian, why don't you read those?
The applicant shall install streetlights subject to approval of the Community Development Department. The applicant shall provide a sanitary sewer easement within Fall Harvest Court and to the west property line capable of serving units 53 to 57, lots A to E in the settlement agreement, subject to approval by the township engineer. The applicant shall provide a public water easement to the west property line to connect with the water line in Fall Harvest Court, subject to approval by the township engineer. And preliminary private road approval for Fall Harvest Court is subject to the township board granting site condominium approval for Autumn Trails Phase 3.
Thank you. And I will take a motion at this time.
I will move to grant preliminary private road approval for the Fall Harvest Court and to provide a favorable recommendation to the Township Board for Autumn Trails Site Condominiums Phase 3, a 25-unit, single-family development on approximately 50.87 acres, subject to the conditions that were previously listed.
Thank you. I need support.
Support.
Thank you, Robin. Any further discussion? Any discussion about the conditions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, you're all set. Thank you. Next is another public hearing regarding the zoning ordinance text amendment, section 3.02 for animals. Do you have an application, Brian?
Yes, project name amendment to section 3.02, animals. Applicant is Plainfield Township. There is no address or parcel number. Project description and action requested to provide a favorable recommendation to the Township Board to approve an ordinance to amend section 3.02 animals as proposed.
Peter? I think that's you.
It is. Essentially, what we're doing is we're repealing a number of sections in the ordinance, the codified ordinances, and then updating some stuff in the zoning ordinance so we can hand over a lot of this stuff to the Kent County Animal Control Division. By doing so, this will make it a uniform throughout the township and through the county and get a little easier for everybody involved. However, we do have a couple things that the township would still like to be able to have control over, and that's the number of animals in a house or location and dog waste. Those are things that are not covered by the county's ordinance, and they're not interested in doing that, and so we would like to incorporate that into our zoning ordinance. Another thing on there too, just to let you know, is that we are adding the keeping of, the prohibiting keeping of lions, bears, exotic animals. That was in the ordinance years ago, then we took it back out, and it's now going back in. And then ultimately, just for the record, if you were to recommend this, it'll go to the Township Board for final consideration, meeting in probably in a month or so. That's all I got.
It's a public hearing, and if anybody wants to comment on this issue that we're working on, I'd love to hear from you. Boy, I'd really love to hear from you. Come on up. Come on up. Give us your name and address and whatever you want to say.
Hello, my name is Sean Heising. My address is 2871 Manitou Drive Northeast, off of 5 Mile. And I'm a little curious to what exotic animals actually would pertain to. I understand large cats, large mammals, but what other exotic animals could that be?
Tigers and bears?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, my.
Yeah. I know that snakes as well as insects could be considered exotic animals as well as fish. So if that may include something such as koi fish or something like that, or even ponds that may be stocked with bass or other sport fish. So I'm just kind of curious about that.
Right, Peter?
Excuse me. Up there on the boards, kind of, let me see if I can zoom in on it. There's a text specifically there. It's really designated towards large carnivores, wolf dog crosses, those types of things. It is not intended to prohibit bass, fish, ducks, keeping, things like that.
Oh, the koi are getting out of hand.
Yeah, I know, with blue water especially.
Yeah,
All right, thank you very much.
I appreciate the input. Anyone else? All right, I'll close that portion of it. Do you have anything you want to say, Brian?
Very good question on that. I would not have thought to, what constitutes an exotic pet. Lizards, things like that, kimono dragons, things are still acceptable, I would assume.
Generally, in there, you'll see there's a clause about domestic animals and what's traditionally held. You can get really into the weeds on some, we've been through it a couple times, but for the most part, it's not intended to do that.
No, I have no other questions.
Thank you. Jim?
Nothing.
Nancy?
I actually just had a clarification question. I think in the staff memo, it was noted that, and I'm trying to find it again, that the limit in the number of cats and dogs was meant to be 3 each, but in the ordinance itself, the text, it showed 4 cats and 3 dogs. So is that just a typographical error somewhere?
That is a user error.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're talking 4 cats, 3 dogs? Cool, just want to make sure.
Robin?
I just recommend a positive recommendation.
Thank you. Dennis?
I'm fine.
Jack?
I'm fine with it. I am concerned about the trend toward higher authorities taking over some of our regulations. And I know this includes sand mining, and it just seems like one thing after another, the control is being taken away from the local level. I have a problem with that. Other than that,
Which we can't fix at this point.
no.
Okay. Yeah.
Peter, I guess I do have one other question. If we vote to say, no, we don't want to move or amend our ordinances, what happens?
Yes? What would happen?
That's sort of interesting in itself. I don't know. But- No,
Well, we would just continue under the process we have, but we would have a little bit, we don't have the oversight capabilities that the county has in this regard.
okay.
Anyone else? No? All right, I'll take a motion at this time.
So move.
Thank you, and that would be for a favorable recommendation to the Township Board to approve the ordinance to amend Section 3.02 on animals as proposed. I'll take a support on that.
I'll support.
Thank you, Brian. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, great. Next is Planning Commission comments. Anybody have any comments? Jack?
No, thank you.
Oh, okay, Dennis? Robin? Brian?
I still want a new sign at Propane Lane, but, because I drive by it every day. But
I will.
just put it down as a monthly comment.
That is Elizabeth's baby, and she will be back well, she's argued, never mind, no pun intended. She'll be back on May 1st, and we will talk about it then.
He's actually opening a second location.
Is he really?
Supposedly Byron, south end south of Grand Rapids somewhere. That's the rumor I hear.
Be the beginning of an empire.
He hasn't installed the proper signage yet. He still has a temporary sign on his lot.
okay.
That wasn't part of
Been
the,
years.
yeah, that was not part of the original design that we approved. The signage should be much nicer than what it is. That's all.
I've made a note, I will email Pete. That's his name, I'll email him when I get back in tomorrow.
No, just a comment that looking forward to getting on with the update to the township master plan, opportunity to bring in alignment with the mitigation work done by the floodplain people, the Plainfield Avenue study. As we've seen over the last couple of years, there's been some tension and conflict involved because we've had some differences between those 3 or 4 different documents. And this is our opportunity to bring them all into alignment.
Thank you. Good. Nancy?
No questions, comments?
I have an observation. I've been seeing an issue on Nextdoor, the app Nextdoor, regarding Cannon Township with neighbors and disputes between neighbors and problems with land use. And I actually saw a rather disturbing comment that Cannon Township doesn't have ordinances for something like this to deal with it. Is that right?
I do not, I'm sure they have some ordinances. I have heard a little bit of this. I don't think they have the ordinances in place to deal with some particular issues, is what I gathered.
It also cropped up in Algoma a little bit too. So I know our ordinances are tight, so I appreciate that. It's a lot. Anything else? Do you have anything, Peter?
Just one update. I want to let you know, and I don't know if we talked about it last time, but the township board did ultimately approve a Plainfield gravel and sand pit, PUD amendment and soil removal conditions. I went down to the county and recorded the restricted covenant and all that material yesterday. We are still finally have agreed upon the language in the bond amount, and they should be ready to go hopefully by tomorrow, so.
Peter, why don't you tell them the reply on that stepped bond thing, which was the controversy?
Why don't you go ahead, because I'm a little foggy on it, Jack.
Okay. Remember, we had discussed a reduction in the bond as he met some of the requirements. Initially, the board was negative on that, and but after discussing it with the attorney and discussing it amongst ourselves, the board adopted what we had proposed. So that was kind of nice.
Thanks for your good work, Jack.
I don't know if I had a whole lot to do with it, but I'm glad that it
Well,
happened.
that's good to know. Thanks. Thank you. Anything else? Peter?
Yeah, just building on that, there was a big learning curve there, and I think they took just about everything that we've provided. We added to it a little bit, but they were ultimately took your almost entire recommendation without changes. So, yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Okay.